when I first started making music, I remember all I wanted was to be prolific, and I looked up to artists who had like these huge discographies, but finishing my work just felt so impossible. Trying to finish tracks felt like death. So if you're struggling to finish a creative project, you probably fall into two camps, either the procrastinator or the perfectionist. The fun thing about these two is that you're usually not one of them, you're usually both of them at different times. The procrastinator avoids the work. I can't write today, I need to clean my desk, or I can't finish the song, I have to make dinner. And the perfectionist wastes a lot of time actually at the end of the creative process working on the thing. The perfectionist was definitely me. It's really painful because you stop actually enjoying the process and you basically just get stuck on this hamster wheel of going round and round, tweaking things endlessly and coming up with excuses as to why it's not done. Being either the perfectionist or the procrastinator are basically just ways of avoiding being seen or being criticized. Brene Brown, an author and researcher on all things shame and vulnerability, she sums it up nicely when she says, "If I look perfect, live perfect, work perfect, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame." To move past the procrastinating or perfectionist stage, you have to really focus on healthy striving. The more you work on creative projects, the more that you develop like this internal feeling of, okay, this is good enough, this is of high enough quality that if I keep working on it, things will just change rather than improve. But it's okay if this muscle kind of takes a lot of time to build. You were bruising my ego while I was giving. When I make music, I notice that a lot of the song gets done when I'm in this state of kind of almost making a demo or making something just kind of off the cuff. Like I'm like, oh, this is a cool idea, let me see where it goes. And this is usually when like a lot of your project comes together, because the second you get too in your head about thinking about finishing it, that's when you start overthinking everything and questioning every final decision. Unsurprisingly, this is most creatives' favorite part of the process, but you can't get stuck here. So let's talk about deadlines. So the difference between an idea and a project is the deadline. My tips when it comes to deadlines is, one, don't get caught up with telling everybody about your deadline and already getting this like false sense of achievement. Because if you're like, oh, I have an EP and it's coming out at the end of March, and you're like nowhere near done with recording the project, you get all this like sense of accomplishment before it's even done. And the second thing is not setting the deadline super early. If you basically have none of your project that's done and you have a deadline, now you're just stressed out without any material to even work with. So wait until your project's slightly developed, until you have an outline, until you have something to work with before setting a concrete deadline. A huge part of navigating the creative process is dealing with these internal critics, or like these internal voices that are constantly changing. You're maybe working on your project and you're like, I'm a genius, it's the best thing I've ever made. Or you're like, I actually hate this project, I hate myself, what am I doing, what is going on? Even though you might start to sound a little bit insane, in her book Mindset, Carol Dweck talks about naming your fixed mindset or naming your inner critic. So being like, Derek is really annoying me. You might start to sound actually kind of insane. These internal critics are going to get louder at certain times. So right before you finish a project, you're going to have this like overwhelming sense of, oh my God, this internal critic is so loud. But also just if you're tired or sad, or maybe you've been rejected some way online, or you're reading things, one of the most important things you can do is remind yourself that this mechanism we have in our brain to not get ejected from the tribe was actually more helpful as we were evolving. But today, if somebody doesn't like my song, the world is not going to come crashing down. So trying to keep things in perspective and rationalizing with this critical voice might help you. I find that without a good creative workflow, it is so impossible to finish anything. Once it gets to the point where I have songs that are 200 tracks, 300 tracks, at the end, everything just becomes a jumbled mess if I don't have any creative workflow. And it's really easy to lose track of what still needs doing. Your creative workflow really can be as simple or as complex as you like. And I've seen people use things like post-it notes where they have tasks written out and post-it notes that get moved as the tasks are completed. Or I've seen people use softwares like Notion or Monday where you move tasks along depending on what stage of the creative process you're in. When it comes to recording music, I like to use something like this. So essentially I have arrangement, lead vocals, background vocals, and as I kind of complete every section of the recording, I can color that in. Once everything's colored in, I know that I have a finished song. Telling myself, okay, I need to finish the drums by Tuesday at 5 p.m. is less overwhelming than I need to finish the entire EP by tonight. Next, let's talk about the 80-20 rule, which is basically an economic principle which talks about like uneven distribution. 80% of profits might come from 20% of customers, or like 80% of results might only come from 20% of your inputs. I have found that this applies to the creative process. When I record music, I find that recording all my vocals, that's at 80%. And even though I still have to add like all the instruments and all the other parts, it's 80% done. If you're working on a video, the 80% might be the A-roll, and then the 20% is all the overlays. A huge breakthrough for me was not getting lost in the details of a project before having the main parts figured out. Lastly, we have to talk about actually publishing, or what I like to call make, share, and iterate. And this has a million names, so I've heard it called plan, do, study, act, or in Japanese, they call it kaizen, which means continual improvement. It's essentially just a feedback loop. And it's really just how we tend to be as humans, which is that if you're learning to walk and you fall over, you're going to get up and try again. And you're basically going to be constantly iterating your approach to things the more that you do it. The main thing you don't want to fall into is never publishing, because then you never actually have a response. Your feeling about the work once it's published is actually a really good indicator of what you need to iterate or not. If I release a song and 3 months go by and I'm like, oh, okay, I would have done these things differently, then that's really good knowledge for me that I can only learn when I've published. Like the second you click publish, everything you could have done differently becomes clear. And even though that feels really scary, it's actually the fastest way to learn and improve. The more that you publish, the easier it gets to train your brain to learn that you're not going to get attacked by a bear and that you're actually just publishing your work. Okay, that is all for now. Feel free to check out my new EP Subject to Change below, and I'll speak to you very soon. Goodbye.